Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Robledo Yamamoto. On behalf of my co-authors, Drs. John He Cho, Amy Voida, and Stephen Voida, I will be sharing key highlights from our paper, We Are Researchers, but We Are Also Humans, Creating a Design Space for Managing Graduate Student Stress. As we may all be aware, graduate student stress is a big problem with pretty significant consequences, including poor physical and emotional health, substance abuse problems, suicidal ideation, and so on. A large-scale survey of graduate students across disciplines revealed that 41% of students are experiencing severe anxiety, 39% are experiencing depression, and 82% are experiencing excessive stress on a day-to-day basis. So stress in graduate school can stem from the culture of busyness, unclear roles and expectations, a lack of feeling of community, the type of research topics that one researches, such as doing research with marginalized groups, lack of access to mental health care, whether it's knowing where to go or not having enough access to compatible providers, and then low stipends and high cost of living. So most current technological stress interventions address the individual, where they really focus on helping graduate students reframe their thoughts, track their behavior or their mood, or maybe increase their mindfulness skills. And so while these are very important, they only address one contributing factor of stress. So as other researchers have pointed out, and as our participants pointed out, stress actually stems from many factors that extend beyond an individual graduate student, such as university policies, low living stipends, lack of access to mental health care, and so on. Therefore, any stress intervention should be multidimensional to really address all these factors. So there are opportunities to design technologies to help address individual and structural factors that affect graduate students. So this is what we set out to explore in our research. So to better understand how graduate students would conceptualize using technology to manage their multidimensional stress, we conducted co-design workshops with 12 graduate students to answer the following research question. How do graduate students currently use and imagine using technologies to manage stress and other mental health challenges of graduate school? So to help us identify how each intervention addressed the multidimensionality of stress, we used what's called ecological systems theory. So ecological systems theory helps us understand external factors that affect an individual by looking at it through three levels: the individual, community, and then the structural level. So the individual level is the smallest unit of analysis, and this will consist of the individual. It includes things such as age, gender, life experiences, and so on. So in this case, the individual level would really consist of an individual graduate student. The community level then would consist of the support structures in which an individual is actively involved. The community level includes family members, close friends, lab mates, members of a degree program cohort, or coworkers. Finally, the structural level, which is the largest unit of analysis and tends to be the most influential, it includes factors such as culture, policy, media, and so on. So in this case, the structural level would include things like the lab, the department, university culture, norms, and policies. So we use this framework as a lens to reflect on how the participants' designs and post-workshop discussions highlight possible design opportunities for supporting multiple stress management techniques across these different units of analysis. And to answer a research question, like I mentioned, my collaborators and I conducted co-design workshops with graduate students. So we selected co-design workshops for this process because we're interested in learning and hearing from graduate students themselves about what types of stress management interventions would be the most helpful to them. So we designed the workshops to last approximately 2.5 hours, and we really focused on 3 phases: exploring how participants conceptualize and externalize their stress, then moving into co-constructing a design space to think about what could help with the stress management, and then finally coming together to discuss the different kinds of technology prototypes that participants came up for. So our goal with the structure was to use the first phase to really develop a safe space and to establish common ground by helping participants discuss different instantiations of stress. These discussions were then used to pivot to a creation of a design space for stress management strategies, which served as a springboard for the development of possible prototypes. So here are some pictures that are examples of some of the activities that we did. So on the left, we have an example of inspiration cards with different kinds of technologies on them. And these are coupled with place cards or setting cards, where one could imagine using a technology. So for example, you might have a VR technology that you could imagine using in a lab space. Then here, this next image is an image of the various mediums that we use so that graduate students could be creative in the development of their prototypes. And then finally here at the top, we have an image of what we called a stress monster, or an external representation of graduate student stress. So in each of these workshops, teams of graduate students developed and iterated on stress management technologies. And at the end of the workshop, we had a total of 7 prototype sketches of technologies that could be helpful to address graduate student stress. So I want to share some key takeaways from our findings. There are many much more rich details and examples in our paper, so I really encourage you to check out the full paper. So our participants identified 3 top stress management strategies: controlling, disconnecting, and normalizing. So controlling stress consisted of prototypes that supported users in gaining information about their body's stress response system, maybe receiving recommendations on how to handle that stress, or gaining insight into their current internal state. So this is more of what you would think of when you think of conventional stress management interventions. Then we have disconnecting from stress, which involved technology that encouraged students to take a break from their work and to disconnect from their stress by connecting with others. The majority of prototypes in this category focused on redirecting attention away from stress and leveraging the space and community for creating distance from the stressors of graduate student life. Finally, we have normalizing stress, which was represented by technologies that help students obtain validation of their feelings. The act of normalizing appears to be an integral component of stress management, especially when it involves peers who are going through similar situations. So then we mapped out these stress strategies into the different system levels, individual, community, and structural, to create an expanded design space for stress management technology that was inspired by our participant prototypes. So here we have each system level, the individual, community, and the structural, along with the different participant prototypes, all 7 here. So we can see how all but one of these prototypes cut across system levels, indicating a need for interventions that address not only the individual, but interventions that address community and societal factors as well. So here's an example of a suggested prototype by participants P3 and P4 that helps control and normalize stress at the individual and the community level. So they developed a system that integrates a user's stress status into Slack. The user's stress status is determined from a wearable device, which is displayed next to a user's name in the Slack workplace. The display of the status then helps normalize feelings of stress by letting other people know that sometimes people are stressed and that sometimes that they need to do something about that stress. They also suggested a physical display that can be put on a desk to share their stress status with other lab members. And then here is another example of a prototype that actually cuts across all levels. So P1 and P2 suggested a prototype that consists of a watch that provides feedback to an individual about their current stress level. The idea here is that the watch would feed into a model that can then make suggestions about what the user could do whenever they are feeling stressed. So this would be giving participants more control over their stress. So in addition to this feedback, P1 and P2 also added a social component to their prototype to both encourage disconnecting from stress and also normalizing the habit of taking breaks. This both helps foster a sense of community by encouraging lab members to connect with one another, and it could also shift lab culture to be more supportive of taking breaks and breaking down the idea that graduate students should be working all the time. So really, throughout all, our participants really stressed the importance of community support for stress management, in addition to addressing individual barriers. So it's not just about knowing how stressed you are, it's also about knowing that others are going through the same thing and that you're all trying to figure it out together. So in another example shown here, participant P10 suggested an interactive design where stress information, which is represented here by the colorful dots, could be displayed in an abstract way so that multiple students could then interact in order to turn these stress dots into a display for community, which is represented by the colorful tiles you see here at the bottom. So despite the responses that suggested the importance of design solutions that cut across these different ecological system levels, there are some challenges with extending technology to the community and societal levels. So one is this sense of responsibility. For example, for technologies that are embedded in the environment, whose responsibility is it then if a community member is struggling with their mental health? So we need to think about how community-based technologies will function within a shared environment and how this may end up creating extra work or extra labor for certain community members. There's also privacy concerns, especially if any mental health data is displayed or shared. So you have to take into consideration the environment where the technology will be deployed, because the technology could either be empowering or it could be shaming and stigmatizing. Finally, it's important to think about the group dynamics, including different power dynamics that may be present. So while there are hierarchies between graduate students, faculty, and administrators, there's also hierarchies within graduate student communities themselves. So technology tends to enhance dynamics that already exist. So some of these technologies may be alienating to some community members. So there might be implicit boundaries that dictate who feels like they belong to the community and are therefore more likely to use the technology, and those who feel like they don't belong. So in summary, creating a nurturing community is a crucial aspect of mental health management. However, in order for this to work, the environment and group dynamics should be safe enough to support mental wellness. Our research highlights the need for a broader-based, more human perspective on stress management, one that addresses across individual, community, and structural levels. Thank you very much for listening, and please reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. Thank you again.